The economy is brutal and sterile. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't care. And so the caring part has to come from the people who are operating around it, like you and me. But the almost kind of Darwinian nature of this is that all enterprises will go through their life cycle and they will eventually die.
From the North Country Media Network, upstate New York's Voices of Authority, this is Building Success Stories.
I'm here today at the offices of the Warren County Economic Development Corporation with President and CEO Jim Siplon. So thank you for having me today, Jim.
Well, wonderful to have you, Ann.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the EDC does?
Well, it can be alphabet soup to many people, but ultimately the Economic Development Corporation's charter is to figure out and to continue to work on making our communities and our economy sustainable over the long haul. Oftentimes that means recruiting, attracting, supporting new and existing businesses. But increasingly that texture is a lot bigger than that. It includes all the things that are about what make the place special and also attractive to both people as well as to businesses. And ultimately to figure out how to make all of this work in a consistent, long-term way.
Okay. And how do you do that? Like, are you going out around the country to conferences and things or advertising? Or?
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I think that is probably the model that a lot of people have in their minds. You know, it's probably helpful for people to understand, you know, how I even got to here because I am one of those people. I was probably one of the last people to build a new factory in this part of New York. And I think most people think that's what we do is run around trying to find people who are, or organizations that are looking to site some big manufacturing or operational facility. Increasingly, that's just not how the economy works. In our particular case, if we just look at our own history, everything that defines the place that we associate with this part of New York has happened because people have wanted to be here first and then sort out what it is that they were going to do second. For instance, the medical device industry, been here for, decades now. The medical device industry could have essentially birthed itself. Cardiac catheters could have been invented and matured almost anywhere in America. But some of the pioneers of that were people who felt very strongly about living in this region and therefore then created what we now see as that industry. I think that's probably more instructive about how economic development, particularly in our community and communities like it, really work. It's about how do you understand the assets of the place? How do you use those in a way that helps you attract the kind of things that will make the place better. Sometimes that's people, sometimes that's businesses, sometimes that's investment. But all of it is really designed around in an era where birth rates are lower, where workforces are not sufficient to meet demand, where the economy is shifting dramatically. Not every community is going to be able to succeed in navigating those waters. And so really our role is to figure out what do we uniquely have to do here in order to maximize the place and create the best possible outcome for the residents, the businesses, and the overall community. And that is a really big, multifaceted problem.
Okay. And so we're lucky in that we have a lot here that does attract people here already. So people are kind of coming to you, kind of coming here, and you're able to then show this is why you should come here. We've got all of these amenities and the people and the infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, let me just give you a sense of the kind of engagement that we would typically have. Occasionally we'll get a phone call or an inquiry from somebody who's outside the area exploring, is that a right place for me to locate what I do or to potentially go to? Almost always, though, it's somebody's already made the decision that this is the place they want to be. If we take a step back and just look at what has our economy always been here, for as long as the places existed, all the way back to the revolution. 1 out of 3, sometimes as much as 1 out of $2 comes into this community from people who do not live here.
Mm-hmm.
They have come here to experience the place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are lyrics in Hamilton that talk about summering in Lake George.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a history, and it's uninterrupted, of the first and most important pillar of our economy is the fact that the place draws people. And that experiential economy is also resilient to things like automation and now AI.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have an authentic Adirondack experience as a virtual concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a real blessing that we have. The underpinning of our economy is something that is timeless and resilient. I mean, there are challenges with it, figuring out how to make that sector productive for both people who work in it, making it more year-round, and for the businesses that operate in it. Those are things we will continue to work on. But we are certainly blessed to have that, because there are many communities that don't have.
Yeah. I'm from
sense.
Gloversville.
Well, so yeah, that's not necessarily a place that people were.
No, they were drawn there back in the day because of the leather industry. It was amenable to that. But then when that left the region, they're not attracting other people to come in.
So, that's the first piece.
Yeah.
The second piece is that we have a huge services infrastructure, which is essentially anchored by healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that has to do with our geography. Some of that has to do with our demography. So if you think about where we are the gateway, the southern gateway to the Adirondack Park, an area the size of New Jersey. We're also, you could think of us as the backyard of the Capital District.
Yeah.
If you were to go look at a recruitment ad for a company in the Capital District, you'll oftentimes see a picture of Lake George. That's the image that they try to present to the rest of the world about what it is to be in this area.
Mm-hmm.
But increasingly, we are also the point at which people access this area that's the size of some states, but is largely geographically vast and also not densely populated. That area really has one major medical nexus, and that is Glens Falls. Glens Falls Hospital and Hudson Headwaters together employ nearly 4,000 people here in a community that that represents, a very significant part of our workforce. And that's because we're serving many, many people that go beyond the boundaries of our community. Yeah. And again, that's not something that's likely to change. I don't see a significant medical infrastructure being created in the park. And I think the demography, the aging of that population is going to be one that continues to require a lot of those services and healthcare. And so the middle part of our economy is also fairly resilient and healthy. You could think of every other thing that goes on in the economic world: retail, professional services, mining, manufacturing, almost any kind of category you can imagine is in that last third. And I think many people including me, had a slightly mistaken impression of how significant things like manufacturing were. Remember, I'm a manufacturer. I came here to start a manufacturing company. And so I see things through that lens. But even in our heyday, in the biggest period of industrial development here in this Glens Falls area, it's never been more than 25% of our economy. The reason that people get confused is the place used to be bigger. And so there were many entities along the river that are no longer there, but the place was also significantly larger. As a proportion of the workforce, though, it really was not significantly more than we have today. Today, it hovers maybe at half that, 10 to 12%. And I don't know that it's necessarily going to dramatically come down. I also don't think it's going to dramatically go up. First of all, manufacturing is increasingly automated.
Yeah.
And second, it's a place that oftentimes is attracted to costs. So cost of labor, cost of energy, cost of goods. We don't necessarily have those as fundamental attributes of our regional economy here. And so I think what we really do have to understand is in that last piece, what is it that would actually make this place work and be complementary to those other pieces? So there are things like, during COVID, for instance, we all took notice of the fact that there were many people from the city and from more populated areas that came here. and they kind of decamped here. And then they realized I can do whatever it is that I'm doing from here as well as from there. That had a significant impact. It was like 10 years worth of immigration here in 6 months.
Yes.
And it really affected our housing, our ability to access housing and the cost of that housing. But it also indicated the power of the place. And so now I look at it often and I think, well, we clearly want to continue to be open to people who would like to live here and maybe live here in a way that is aligned with the place. There's not a smokestack associated with somebody running a business out of their third bedroom. There's not necessarily environmental impacts associated with somebody who's a knowledge worker who's choosing to do that work here. Mm-hmm. And so this is an expandable part of our economy, a growth-oriented part of our economy that could come without significant trade-off to the quality of life to the place. Mm-hmm. I think another aspect that we spend a lot of time thinking about is the park is the largest public and private partnership that exists in the United States. It's both a state park, but it's also made up of private lands right alongside of public lands. To the extent that experiment is going to continue to sustain, we have to figure out how to take the energy and effort we spend on protecting the place and creating enterprise and knowledge-based businesses out of that. Mm-hmm. I think about, for instance, water and the protection of water. Mm-hmm. Lake George is one of our most notable assets. And one of the great attributes of Lake George is the world recognizes it as a pristine body. And there was a lot of knowledge and effort and organizational commitment that has helped create that. And yet we have yet to birth any industry or enterprise out of that. That represents an opportunity for us to take what we already know and what we already do and create economic value out of that as well. Mm-hmm. And that would not create impact in the park in the way that, say, a manufacturing center might. Yeah. And so we spend time working across all of those dimensions, trying to figure out how do we piece these together in the most productive way? How do we say yes to the right things? How do we attract the right things? How do we manage the things that have been here historically? And then how do we make sure that all of it can sustain for the long haul so this place can be even better 10, 20, 50 years from now than it is today?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you announced at the luncheon in the autumn about the development of the water center, was it?
Well, we've been talking about that idea of a freshwater.
Yeah. How is that going?
Well, so you got to remember that I'm a water guy. So
yes. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to your background in a minute.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in water, and so I tend to be biased that way. Yeah. But clearly, one of the things that makes the Adirondacks is this enormous collection of freshwater bodies. It's probably the greatest collection of freshwater assets that are pristine and protected anywhere. Yeah, and so we've been thinking a lot about, well, how do we not only go about continuing to protect them, but how do we create a place or a hub for where that knowledge can also lead to investment and to company formation and to employment. I use as an example, all the salt reduction we've used to try to take rock salt usage down around bodies of water. And we need to protect our roads and make them safe, but the saline concentrations are one of the precursors to lots of problems, including harmful algal blooms. And so there's been a concentrated effort to try to come up with alternative ways to address that, usually using brine as an alternative. But the point of that is that there are industries that we are tapping in other places to do that, to modify our equipment and to figure out how to make the right mix and to teach people how to do that. That should be happening here.
We could be doing that because we've got the need here.
And we have the knowledge base here, and we probably have done it more successfully here than almost any place. And so we need to take the leadership and commit to the idea that this is an economic development cluster in the same way that chips are, or that wind energy is, or that financial services are. And this is a case I've been making with the state and trying to build a coalition of people that recognize the opportunity here. The Lake George Association, the Darren Freshwater Institute, Rensselaer Polytechnic, and the Jefferson Project are all components of this. And we're thinking about how do we take that critical mass and build even more out of it. That work is ongoing. Anytime you work with a large coalition like that, it can feel like, the progress is somewhat plotting, but it's also important that we keep that coalition together because we don't want to compete for these resources. We want to do this in a connected, aligned way.
Yeah. So are you spearheading this? Like, are you the one that's coordinating all these different parties?
I mean, I think most people would see it that way. Both personally, I have an interest in that. I act as kind of a common point. For instance, I'm on the board of the Lake George Association. We've started to develop a multifaceted relationship with Rensselaer and many of the things they do, including the Freshwater Institute and their connection to the Jefferson Project. But also, my charter and the charter of this team is to figure out how do we go expand the economy here. And this is clearly an opportunity there. So we have surface area in all of those areas. So we kind of act, you think of us more as like the captain of the team.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I'm the owner or the coach of the team.
No, but
right. And we will continue to do that until the point at which it starts to take a life of its own.
Yeah. Like a lot of the projects you probably have been involved in. So you came here because of Just Water, right? You were the COO at the time? Or at some point you were?
Yeah, I was employee number one.
Yeah. So you were employee number one and you were the one that brought it to this area. So what were the determining factors there?
Well, so, I had a history in water before that. And, for instance, I'd managed Fiji Water and helped build Fiji Water to the size of it is now. In Fiji. Yeah.
The other side of the world.
Yeah. The largest, water production facility in the world that's not in China or the United States. And so, I had a fair background in that, although that really wasn't my focus when I left, Fiji. I really got involved in more water-related work. I had my own company called Rethink H2O that did large-scale water reuse projects all over the world. But along the way, there were some people, some celebrities, in this case, the Smith family, who were interested in developing an alternative bottled water product that would demonstrate to the industry that a bottled water could be made essentially plastic free and still be a profitable, successful venture. And I was intrigued by that idea when they asked for my input, and I started consulting with them to try to help them through that. And I think we came to understand that we both love this idea. And so I was actually the first person that was hired to actually operationalize that. Yeah. And we looked at a number of places across the country, but the reason that we came here is that this place has spectacular water from a quality standpoint. This is kind of the gold standard of how consumers think of a natural water source to taste. But also because the place had already made a commitment to preserve and not develop the aquifer that was generating from. I think another thing is that it had enormous amounts of excess water.
Yeah. That's Hudson.
Well, so essentially what happens is, when rain and precipitation occurs here and it drops in the mountains, it's flowing through an largely underground aquifer system, and it's slowly making its way to the Hudson River and out to the ocean. Glens Falls, for instance, has a number of reservoirs up on the southern Adirondack region that they use to feed their water supply. They don't take their water from the Hudson River. And that water is essentially part of this water system. But underground, there's enormous amounts more. I think many people think of that as like this big storage container, but what it really is an underground river. And that water used to lead to the industries that were all along the Hudson River. And that water supported a manufacturing environment that was much larger 50 years ago than it is today. And so most of that water today is no longer needed.
Yeah.
The water system that Glens Falls had was one of the most sophisticated water systems in the state of New York when it was built in the late 1800s. And yet it was designed to service a community that was 4 times larger than it is today. And so most of that is excess. And what we did was look at it and say, well, if the water's great and if it's not under competition, then this seems like a good place to explore. And then we got to know more and more about the community, and we fell in love with each other, and that's why we based it here. But I think that's another example of what I was talking about before. The place is what drove that decision.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of some policy. It wasn't
lobbied to come
no,
here.
And it wasn't an economic incentive, and it wasn't even a relationship. It was the place that acted as the draw.
And you've stayed.
And yeah, that was 12 years ago. And I loved running Just, and today Just is well established as a.
They're doing fabulously.
Yeah, you'll find it everywhere across the country and internationally.
Yeah, Europe and
it tells the story of Glens Falls and Queensbury and this region on every bottle. And I'm very, very proud of the work that we did at Just. But in 2020, I was serving on the board of the EDC because the EDC had been a wonderful ally.
So you were on the board.
Yeah, they had really helped me establish that business. Ed Bartholomew, who was the leader at the time, was just a wonderful ally and resource. But while I was serving on the board and right at the advent of COVID, Ed passed away suddenly. And it was a shock to our entire community. And so I offered to step off of the board to help stabilize the organization. And I thought maybe that would be a temporal thing and just try to make sure that the EDC continued to be there as a resource when everyone was in great transition and there was a great deal of stress about the economy. I wanted to make sure that the organization stayed viable. It was a great learning experience for me, but now I'm entering my 6th year, so I guess we could say that I'm not the interim
You're not
guy
temporary.
anymore. Yeah.
Officially not temporary.
No, and the reason is that I just feel like the opportunity here to try to help this place continue to be better and better, even more viable, even more sustainable, was just too compelling to not want to continue.
Yeah, that's great. You have a good passion for it. You're a good spokesman for the region.
We love everything about the place. My wife and I have lived here now as long as we've lived anywhere in our time together. And while I cannot say that I am a native of the place, I definitely feel like this is my place.
That's great.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about your background. So you started out, you went to college and you were ROTC. I looked up your LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah.
So you were captain in the Air Force.
I was.
And then you got into industry. So just tell us a bit about what led you through and then into water.
Yeah, it's a funny path, but originally I'm an astrophysicist.
Okay.
By my college degree, and I did space-related work. I did NASA-related research while I was in school on Mars exploration, and then when I got out of school, I was commissioned in the Air Force, and I served at Hanscom Air Force Base in Boston, doing space and missile warning related work, and it was a very, very exciting time from a technology standpoint. I mean, we were essentially at the advent of the satellite era, and technologies that we take for granted now, like GPS and satellite communications, were just essentially being launched and birthed then. So it was a fun part to be a part of. And when I left the service, I continued in telecommunications. I worked for a telecommunications company, MCI, which many people may recognize as one of the phone companies that broke up the AT&T monopoly. I helped them develop a lot of new businesses. The emergence of the internet and networks meant that we managed more than a telephone company. And so I spent a few years doing that. Then WorldCom bought MCI, and it kind of had one of its own, interesting
There's
chapters.
A lot of transitions in the whole industry.
Yeah, I left that industry and went to work for General Electric and did some work around diesel locomotives. I was responsible for parts.
That's old school.
Yeah, couldn't get more old school. Yeah, and then eventually went to work for a holding company in Los Angeles that had a number of different ventures, and I acted as both their CIO and chief technology officer of one of their companies, Teleflora, but they bought Fiji Water during their tenure.
That's interesting.
And so I eventually went out to try to help scale Fiji Water up to the size that it is today. Lived on the island with my family for a number of years. Was one of the more exciting chapters of my life. While we were there was a coup, and there was an attempt to nationalize the factory, which we were able to kind of hold off. But during that time, we also explored the idea of an alternative site. So we bought another water company in New Zealand, and I helped secure that acquisition. And at that point, I realized my kids probably needed to be somewhere that wasn't, the rest of the world. And so we came back to the United States, and that's when I started my own company, Rethink H2O. That's what I was doing when I met the Smiths and wound up coming here.
So your passion in water started when you were at Fiji. You didn't go to Fiji because of the passion of water.
No, the reason I went to Fiji, I was like a technology CIO kind of guy. And when I was a part of the due diligence while we were looking at purchasing the company, I looked at it, and $1 out of $5 in the Fijian economy was responsible. Fiji Water was responsible for it. I've never seen a company that had that much of an impact in a particular country. And so I was intrigued by, can that be a force for good beyond just the success of the company? And that's what I was passionate about. And I kind of stayed passionate, wore down the leadership of the company I worked for. And eventually they gave me the opportunity to go out. Their challenge was just figuring out how to scale it to meet demand. The product was very well accepted throughout the world. And as a result, they had a challenge just keeping up with the demand. So I helped them. Yeah. While we were there, we actually purchased 3 ships because we needed to be able to wheel that. We couldn't just depend on commercial routes because they don't call on Fiji enough. So we wound up having to bring the product and raw materials in and out on our own to supplement the shipping lanes. I learned a lot about the way the worldwide supply chains work there. But it was a wonderful experience. And one of the things I'm really, really proud of is when we were at Fiji, we started something called, there were a number of different ventures, but we put the Sovi River rainforest under 99 years worth of preservation with Conservation International. We also developed a whole series of water-related foundations and charities. And we did more than 40 well projects on Fiji. We were essentially providing the water infrastructure for a big part of the island. And since I've left, they've done many, many, many more, probably more than 100 more. And as a result, Fiji Water has essentially become not only a well-known brand, but it's also become a force for environmental stewardship, although I think many people would find that ironic. But also a source of great social value to the islands and communities of Fiji. Yeah. And that was one of the greater experiences of my professional life, was recognizing how business and enterprise could also, beyond just being a virtue to themselves, they could be a larger asset to a community. Yeah. And it helps feed a lot of what I think about now when we're here trying to figure out how do we make the economy not only serve us in terms of the dollar.
To build the community aspect of it all as well also. Yeah. Because you had said, I don't even remember which time I heard you speak, where you were talking about how because this population here is aging, we're losing like volunteers and many of the nonprofits that we have here and in the fire department and that kind of thing. So it's important to keep bringing younger, newer people into the area to support these things, because we don't think about the whole big picture of it.
But one of the first things we had to do was help the whole community understand the role of demographics and population trends in not only what was happening now, but what would happen in the future. The whole country is aging, and we just happen to be at the front end of that. The United States has not been at replacement birth rate in most of our lifetime since the early 70s, which means that there are not more people born than are dying every single year. And as a result, we're seeing our workforce shrink and we're seeing our workforce age. We just happen to be at the front edge of that. The median age in the country is still under 40. The median age of the state of New York is right around 40. The median age here in our area is nearly 50. And what that means is if we don't bring in a significant amount of new people, we will age in place every single year. 10 years from now, our median age will be 60. That means there will be more people who are Medicare eligible than not. Now, it can sound like I feel that as a negative. It's just a truth. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, we need to deal with reality so that we can address these issues.
Yeah, and I think many people are to some degree always somewhat resistant or fearful of change. But in this particular case, change is absolutely needed if we're going to be successful in the long haul. If you're a community where the majority of the people are not of working age, you have to import everything. You have to import people to take care of you. You have to import people who do the basic services in your community because they just don't live there organically. That's not either a economically viable place to live or just a logistically viable place to live.
And not as good of a community.
That's right. And so we have to continue to revitalize this. South Street is a perfect example. For a long, long time, South Street was viewed as kind of maybe the other side of Glens Falls. It took 10 years of real significant investment and continuity and continued commitment to see what we're seeing today. But now we see hundreds of new housing units and with them new residents that help feed things like the hospital, which is only a block away. It's our leading employer, more than 2,500 people going in and out of that place to work every single day. That is fundamentally good for all of us. And the process of doing this, while it may have felt unnerving to people, I think now when they walk up and down South Street, they say, this is fantastic. Why didn't we do this sooner?
Yeah.
It did not take away from the place. It created even more of what makes the place special. You know, we just opened our 18th and 19th restaurant here on South Street. There was a time you and I both remember when you could count on one hand the number of places you could eat on a Monday in Glens Falls. Yeah. And that's good for everybody. You know, that makes not only a richer life, but that's a whole nother economic engine that we never even had in town. Yeah. You don't have to go to Saratoga in order to have a world-class culinary experience. It's right here in Glens Falls. Nobody thinks that's a bad thing. But in order to do that, we had to go make concerted effort, concerted investment, and to say yes to some of that change. And I think whenever people, you know, start to worry about, well, what will this mean if we continue to try to bring more or new people here? I just tell them, walk up and down South Street with me and tell me if you feel like this, it changes the place, but it doesn't change the character. Yeah. It just makes the character more likely to sustain.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about median age before, so it made me think, and I was thinking about South Street, and if you look at who owns the businesses, how many of them are under 40 or might be around 40? Like a significant number of the business owners.
It's one of the most exciting things, you know.
So that is exciting.
I know them all.
Not all from here. Some are, some aren't.
And to me, that's all part of the process. They came here.
And they're embracing
they were attracted
as
at this.
Their new home.
That's right. Glens Falls feels like an approachable, accessible city, but still feels walkable with all the amenities they're looking for. Coffee shop, shared workspace, live music, a cultural scene of, you know, a vibrant downtown, access to healthcare. All of these things that people yearn for are right here. You can see them. And so they look at it and say, well, how can I be a part of it? And then they open a storefront here. They open a business like Realize. They make our place better. And I am so excited by that influx of new energy and new ideas. And we're trying to engage that community all the time. In fact, we just formed an advisory group of some of these newer businesses and entrepreneurs because we want to figure out not only how's their journey been, but how can we be even more helpful along the way.
How to keep them going.
That's right.
Because I think some people go into it and may not last a year. Like we have an empty spot in this building right now. So putting investment into keeping these guys going is a good initiative.
I'm glad you think so. We do too.
Yes, of course. But it's what people need too, you know. And I think it's great that people are working together. Like there's events at least once a week, if not more times a week going on.
I think sometimes we all forget, even those of us that didn't grow up here, we forget how great we have it, you know, but oftentimes if you have somebody who comes to visit you, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, and they spend a few days here, that's when you see it because you look through their eyes in a day. Let's imagine, it's Thursday. We could wake up, go downtown, go to any number of remarkable spots for coffee. We would know many of the people that we saw. We could walk down to the Hyde Gallery, one of the premier collections of art in the entire state. And it's right here available to us, one of every master or known artist you can imagine. And then later that day, we could wander over to the shirt factory and see all of the artisans that are here locally, but also what that place becomes on a Thursday afternoon with the food trucks and 4 different stages of live music. And it's just free.
Yeah.
We just walk over to it, and there'll be 1,000 people, some of them from here, some of them from somewhere else. And then they not only get to experience all of this, but then they could go to any number of world-class restaurants that evening. They could go to a hockey game at night. They could see a symphony, play somewhere in a park. It's just the amount of things that we have here.
Sometimes too much, because it's hard to decide what to do.
But that's a good problem to have.
Right.
And, many communities would yearn for
Yes.
even a fraction
Yeah.
of the cultural
Yeah.
assets that we have.
Well, another great thing is the opening of the new stage at Shepherd's Park. And there has been, my brother has been playing on there 3 or 4 times since the new stage opened. And I was like, it's amazing. There's music going constantly, and people are going there. People are going up there just because there's this great new space now.
Well, that's another energy. By the way, what does that and what we've been talking about on South Street and Glens Falls have in common? Both of them are downtown revitalization initiative communities. And what that means is that they've made the commitment as a community to put together a strong group of local community players and advocate for a $10 million investment in their community from the state that is designed to create leverage and additional investment. Yeah. And in both places, it's working spectacularly. In South Street, within, the period, it took more than 10 years because of COVID here, but by the time it was done, more than $50 million worth of outside investment accompanied the state's investment. In Lake George, we're seeing the same thing. The reimagination of Shepherd's Park and the amphitheater there created even new energy, and that has led to people investing more money in properties, both lakefront and in the village, and all of that has created an energy that people haven't seen in years and years. Yeah. The place has always attracted people, but it sometimes can start to feel like, is it any different? And clearly it is growing, expanding, and improving right in front of us. I'll tell you another community that's like this is North Creek.
I was going to mention North Creek too. Yeah.
We spent a lot of time in North Creek, the far end of Warren County, but also essentially could not be more Adirondack than that. Yeah. Orta's southern outpost is Gore Mountain, which is the largest and most spectacular ski area in New York. And for a long, long time, there was Barton Mines and there was Orta and Gore Mountain, but the community itself was essentially stuck. And the reason it was stuck is because they didn't have the infrastructure that allowed them to make any kind of improvements. And in their case, it was a wastewater system. And for many years, they had struggled with the idea of how do we build one when the community is so small, the costs and the effort seem so daunting. Yeah. And we joined with the local community to try to help them get over that hurdle. We still participate as part of members of the sewer committee today. They were able to effectively form a sewer district and eventually construct a sewer, which is in the final stages of construction now. But, with once that wastewater system came in, the state made $25 million investment in expanding Orta's facilities because they had the wastewater system to receive it. And in downtown, the old Phoenix Hotel is now being redeveloped under the name of the Public House and reopened for the first time in a decade.
Did it? It's reopened?
Yeah, it'll go through its formal reopening later this year, but its soft opening has already started to occur. And all of that community is starting to reshape. And all of that comes from teaming investment and intentionality around what is the future that we would like to create for ourselves. And then another example of a community that is improving because of that.
Yeah. And there's a buzz about North Creek now with more restaurants opening up, and you've got the Revolution Rail that's up there that's drawing people up there, and they're all collaborating.
Yeah.
You got Tannery Pond Center.
It's a wonderful collection of assets.
So arts and shopping, and
it's oftentimes been seen as a winter destination because of Gore, but the truth is in the summer there's a significant amount of energy. You mentioned RevRail, more than 50,000 people ride RevRail every year. That's a staggering number. If you put that together with the rafting numbers and now Orta's investment around some of their assets like the Zip Coaster, which they're building on the ski bowl side, that will become a summer destination as well as a winter destination. That allows that economy, that tourism-based economy, to become more year-round, more more robust.
Yeah.
That improves everything for everyone. That then leads to more investment, a larger tax base, and a better community.
Yeah. So tourism is a huge draw. You gave a figure at the Lake George Chambers talk. What billions of investment in the area comes from the experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's a staggering number.
Yeah.
And beyond the billions that you're talking about, I think it's important for people to understand that this is a binary. You either have it or you don't. If you tried to create a tourism economy that generated $1 billion or more of economic value, it would be staggering what you would have to invest in order to do that. I mean, that's Disney-like kind of investment. And yet we have it right here. The combination of the Adirondacks, Lake George, some of the assets we've talked about. What our goal is number one, to get everyone to recognize how unique that is. And number two, to not be afraid of how do we leverage that to help us accomplish some of the things we need to accomplish. You know, occupancy tax is an example of a tool that we get. Sales tax is a tool that we get, but we should be thinking about how to utilize those revenue streams to deliver value to residents that will make the community even more robust going forward. I, for instance, have been an advocate of taking some of that OCTAX money and investing it in infrastructure that will allow the community resident to experience a better quality of life, in addition to supporting the idea of additional tourism. I wouldn't say that goes without any kind of pushback. There are people who think, hey, why don't you stay in your lane and you don't need to talk about this? But I also think, you know, we should be thinking about how Airbnb OCTAX revenues get pointed towards housing development here that would allow for entry-level housing to be more accessible to our residents. I think by having that, we have the opportunity to have that dialogue. And by having those revenue streams, we at least have the choices. And in this particular economy, if we look around, we don't have to look very far to see communities that don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about too is Finch. So that's been a big story lately, and I commented on it in my newsletter last week about, and I have an affinity.
That was a really,
Finch.
really amazing piece that you wrote. I see that kind of analysis, that kind of thinking it's rare to see it.
That's how I am. I read multiple newspapers. Like, I like to see all sides. And sometimes I get criticized for that because I want to see all sides, because I think it's important, because there isn't always one side to every story.
Well, let me just tell you, if somebody criticizes you, that just means they're paying attention. They may have a different opinion, but what you did there was remarkable.
Well, thank you. But for me, I think it's really important. Like I said, I have an affinity for Finch because I used to be a paper buyer for a big printing company. And we were mainly lightweight papers because we were printing prospectuses and things like that. But occasionally we needed a heavier weight. And I was like, oh, Finch. I've heard of Finch. My brother lives up there. So we started using some Finch, but not tons, but enough that they brought me up. And I did a tour, and they wined and dined me. They took me to the Sagamore and all that. Put me up in the Queensbury.
Wow.
So I have an affinity for Finch. So I was alarmed when they put out their announcement and thinking, how is this going to impact the community? And people were like, oh, yeah, okay, no more smell. Like, because I live just on the other side of the bridge. So I get impacted by the whole paper mill environment. But some people were posting, I just lost my job, even though they said they were going to be moving people to other parts of, and I've worked for big multinational companies before, so I know how these things work. But then also, because you can't not notice the big trucks of trees, of logs coming in and out and stuff. So that's going to impact them as well. And then you guys worked together with the Chamber and the IDA and the Glens Falls Economic Development to put out a statement that you're supporting Finch's decision. So I'm sure you looked into, like, I didn't get time to really look up into why Finch was making this decision, assuming this is sound financial decision for them.
Well, let me help you unpack on that. There's a lot in what you just said. Let's start with the fact that Finch is one of the oldest standing businesses in the state of New York. And it has been a driving force not only here, but in the paper economy that it serves, the paper industry that it's in, for more than a century. That's remarkable in today's time. I worked for GE for years. GE is not the same company. It's a vestige of what it once was. So first, we have to admire their remarkable ability to adapt and just continue to endure. But the world that they operate in is changing. We see it all around us. I mean, look, are you using the same amount of paper that you did 5-10 years ago?
No.
That's right. And so that they're in an industry that is moving away from them in terms of demand. And it requires incredible nimbleness in order for us to stay competitive and for them to just be viable. So first of all, they're in an existential battle every day to survive in a very brutal, very cost-conscious industry. So I applaud their effort to do that for 150 years. This is just the most recent pivot that they've had to make, but probably one of scores that they've had to make over their life.
Big news.
Right. And let's just kind of take it piece by piece. Finch makes high quality paper, the kind of paper that you would want to put a presentation on or a cover letter on. That has a limited market, but they would like to make sure that they're playing in every facet of that market. In order for them to go make the investments in the front end of their facility that produces these end products that you and I see, that's competing with dollars to take care of their back end, which is doing something that a number of entities are doing, and they're not necessarily doing better. They're just doing here. And that is to process a low-grade timber into the pulp that eventually makes its way into being paper. I don't think they took this decision lightly, but what they clearly said was, if I'm going to go invest tens of millions of dollars into trying to extend the life of this factory and its economic impact to this community, I'm better served by doing that on the front end than I am on the back end. I don't buy myself any longer tenure or differentiation in the back end, but I could make products that I'm not making today and serve parts of the market over here. I understand that decision. That impacted people. That impacted customers. That impacted supply chains. They were so remarkably tuned into that when they contacted me. I know them because they've had a longstanding relationship with the EDC. They've been board members for many, many years, but they're also just remarkable civic citizens. If you'd be hard pressed to go to any significant cultural or charity event that you do not see evidence of Finch's investment. And so my view here is we got to help them survive. We got to help them continue to
we have
be
one
here.
Idle factory on the other side of the river.
Well, that's an example of how likely.
So we don't need two idle factories.
So anything that we can do to help them extend that runway and be viable for another generation is in our interest. So listen, they came to me and they explained this. They said, we're going to take the people who are associated with this facility in the back end and attempt to place them in the front end. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to go. It doesn't necessarily mean that the position is exactly the same as one before. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you are given a choice about whether or not you take the package they're offering you or you stay employed, many people make an independent decision there. But I know that their commitment was to try to keep as many of those people as they possibly could. The second part of that is they immediately came to me and said, what do we do to try to address the supply chain? They're continuing to take raw timber to feed their biomass operation, and they will continue to take a significant portion of what they used to take in order to feed that, but it will not be 100%. So I said, well, we'll contact the various state entities, Empire State Development, the governor's office, to immediately start to address what are some of the alternate markets we can produce for timber. And the reason that's important is not just because Finch wants to take care of that supply chain. It's because that's one of the viable ways that somebody can make a working class living in the Adirondack Park. A significant portion of the forest lands that are privately owned continue to be sustainably harvested. Well, if that's going to happen, we need to find a market for those those forest products. And in this particular case, this pulp mill will not be one. Now, Sylvamo, which still operates one, could be one and may take additional input. But a number of years ago, we started to explore with a number of community partners, what are some other alternatives for using that kind of wood material? We're reviving that community and activating that effort, and with support of the state, which we will later apply maybe in the next few weeks, for a study grant that will allow us to objectively look at this together with those partners, including the Empire Forest Products Association, that represent many of those loggers and transporters. The goal here is not just to try to figure out how do we check this box. The goal is to make sure that one of the viable ways of economic vitality that is aligned with protection of the park does not disappear. So we're committed to this in the long haul with Finch's support, but it's even bigger than Finch. I'll use as an example the fact that we continue to struggle to build cost-effective housing in the park. It feels like there is at least something worth exploring here to take this low-grade timber and figure out how we could put it together with other materials to make composite materials that would allow us to build much more cost-effective, smaller scale housing, maybe modular homes that will help us address the workforce and affordable housing crisis that we have in the park. When we do that, we also would take the carbon that is sequestered in that tree and keep it in the park instead of transporting it all over. That actually helps the state meet some of its climate goals without necessarily having to electrify anything. In this case, I think there are a lot of potential partners in what comes next. As jarring as that announcement was from Finch, it also gives us an opportunity to reimagine together with many of our partners and allies, what do we do next? How do we do that intentionally? How do we create the future that we need?
And maybe come back stronger. Like you said, if there's a new industry that could prop up in the Adirondacks, imagine has to do around that.
Imagine 5 years from now, if Finch is even more viable than they were before this announcement, and we've been able to shift that timber into a more productive use that also helps us meet an emerging community and personal need of the park. In that case, we actually may have manifested what you just said. That's our challenge, is to go figure out how to take those kind of ingredients.
And we have to have that forward thinking in order to do it. And that's what the EDC helps people do.
But I also really enjoyed your perspective of the fact that the way that this is perceived by other...
My whole point was about communication, because that's what I do. And if Finch had maybe communicated, and they may have internally done it better, I think it would have made a different impact on people.
Yeah. And listen, I wasn't in those boardrooms, so I don't know all of the decisions and trade-offs they have to make. But I can tell you, having been in many meetings like that they work for a holding company that is based somewhere else, just like Essity did across the river.
True. Yeah. And I'd forgotten that Finch is actually not just Finch.
And the first thing they have to do is make sure that they're still viable inside of that structure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no Finch. And we don't have to look very far to see an example of what happens when that doesn't go that way. And so I completely understand their focus on how do we manage this communication process in-house first. Our job is to go help them manage it externally. I agree with you that, I'm sure all of us can learn things about how to communicate even better. But what I thought was really instructive about what you had to say was the fact that no matter who does it and in what order, the idea of, are you advancing an agenda, or are you essentially, is your narrative a fiction or a truth?
Right,
And the one thing we have to always be is a truth. In order for us to be a viable, trusted, credible organization, we've got to be we can't be projecting an idea. We have to project what is. And in this case, our job was immediately to try to help them fill the voids in what that decision may have created. And together with them, we were able to craft an even better message than any one of us could have done alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, great. Thank you for talking on that, because it's current news. And I look forward to seeing how this is all going to move forward. Because I drive past that empty factory a couple times a day. on the other side of the river, and always thinking like, what's going to happen here? My brother was involved in politics in South Glens Falls, and he said they put millions, if not billions, into that factory for environmental protections, and now it's just sitting there.
Yeah, it is a reminder every time we go by it. And listen, the economy is brutal and sterile. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't care. And so the caring part has to come from the people who are operating around it, like you and me. But the almost kind of Darwinian nature of this is that all enterprises will go through their life cycle and they will eventually die. I'll go back to another one, Angiodynamics, when they made their announcement that they were essentially leaving the manufacturing sector here. We stayed in contact with them throughout that process, and there were many people who were both angry and hurt over this. I mean, it had been a fundamental part of this economy for most people's lifetime. The problem was that the intellectual property protection they have over that first generation of cardiac catheters and that technology had largely expired. And now that product was being made as a commodity almost anywhere. They had to then make a transition to, okay, what are we going to become that will allow us to be viable? In that journey, they first made the decision that they were going to pull away from what they were doing and move that to other places. And then along the way, they discovered that there were complications with that maybe were different than they imagined. And because we were in contact with them and we could continue to problem solve with them, we were able to help them find a graceful solution where they're still doing some part of that as well as managing their transition into the products of tomorrow. That's a good outcome, but it's still less than what was here at its heyday. There's nothing I can do about the fact that a cardiac catheter can be made in China now for a fraction of what it's made here. But what I can do is partner with them to try to figure out how do we sustain their operation for as long as possible to the greatest benefit to the company and the community as possible. That comes from relationship. If we had gotten angry with them, banged our fist on the table and said, damn you, I can't believe you're closing, good riddance. That opportunity would not have existed. And I think it's another reason that an organization like us serves the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the lobbying, like you said, you're working with state agencies over the whole issue with the logging. So there's so many assets that what EDC is doing for this community.
Well, I mean, I mentioned your piece a minute ago because I thought that was really, really well done. I think it was informative. I think it provided a unique, objective viewpoint. I find that your kind of deep, thoughtful analysis is more needed today than ever. All of us can go to our computer, type in a query, and through 4 different AI engines get an answer to the question that is remarkable and deep. Okay.
But is it right? You never know.
I don't know if it's right.
Yeah.
I know that what it is a compilation of all that has been written in a particular segment about that topic. But rarely is the question the same as the one that person was answering or the problem that they were addressing. The deepness that you and this format represents is an opportunity for people to find authentic dialogue, learning, and connecting the dots that does not exist in that environment. And while I find you to be really pleasant to spend time conversing with.
Thank you.
I think you're also delivering a huge service that more and more entities both need and will benefit from. And I look at particularly our region as a place where that kind of thoughtful analysis will find root. We just need to get more people to understand that they have somebody who can help them develop.
Because there's so many people that have such great knowledge, experience, skills to share, but they don't seem to understand that this is a good format to share it in.
Well, I can tell you that the blogosphere and podosphere is made up of an enormous amount of stuff.
Yeah.
I could sit and listen to you talk to somebody all day.
Well, thank you.
And
there's so many great people here.
That does not make me angry. It does not make me feel like I wasted my time. It makes me better for every 20 or 30 minutes that I spend with you as you're talking deeply with somebody about some topic that we all care about.
Yeah.
I think the service that you provide is really important. I think that we certainly want to try to help you get more and more people to recognize.
Great. Thank you very much. Because the more people we have involved in it, the more listeners we're going to gain as well. So I'm working on two aspects of it. I'm trying to get the people podcasting and also trying to get people listening. So some people feel that because there isn't a huge commute time around here, that maybe that's one reason not as many people listen to podcasts. But I think there's a lot of other time you have to listen to podcasts, not just in the car.
I can't answer for everybody. I can only answer for myself. But it isn't because of that.
Yeah.
It's because most of those voices I don't feel like add value to my life. I really feel like you are a non-anxious presence, but a curious one. And that is rare. And I think the more and more people that find you, the more that they're going to be intrigued by whatever conversation you're having.
Awesome.
And I think you will, if you can stick it out, I think you're going to see increasing, not just people listening, but people becoming part of that community that yearn for it, because it's so different than what is existing in most of the places, which is largely done for shock value or for exposure or for marketing.
Exactly.
And in your particular case, the only agenda is talking about something that matters.
Yeah, trying to find answers. Like you said, you have to tell the truth. I'm always looking for what is the truth or the many sides of the truth that there might be.
Well, so for me, I think finding you is like finding a needle in the haystack.
Well, thank you. Anything else about yourself or the EDC you want to add?
The EDC is a combination publicly and privately funded organization, but we are of the place. And I tell people all the time that this is their office too. If you're in Glens Falls and you want to know more about us, you should stop by. We're interested in what it's like to be a visitor. We're interested in what it's like to be a business owner. We're interested in what it's like to be a person who's just trying to make their way in today's world and today's economy. And certainly we're interested in anybody who has thoughts about the things that we work on every day. But this particular place is an example of what I hope the rest of the experience when people come here, they have. They walk in the door, they look in, they say, this is not what I expected. This is more than I expected. This is welcoming. This is resourceful. This is optimistic. I see potential here. And when we have those kind of experiences, it not only feeds our soul, it helps us remember why we do what we do. And so we want everyone to feel like they can walk through these doors and be a part of this community, which, sits under the umbrella of the EDC, but those are just letters. The thing that matters most is I think most people want to love the place that they're in, and they want to be a part of making it even better. And that will always circle around this place.
That's a great point to end on. So thank you for speaking with me today.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to Building Success Stories, a production of the North Country Media Network. Our mission is to document the professional legacies and success stories that drive our region forward. To discover more shows in our network, or to learn how we can help you own the conversation in your industry, visit us online at northcountry.media.